Hello, welcome everybody to another episode of Arthur's Roundtable. We're super excited to have Michael Nash with us today. Many of you know who he is. I have to big shout out to Clint, my friend, who introduced us many years ago when we were in Costa Rica. We talked about this, a related project to this, and I'm so glad to see that Michael was able to pull us together on a timely topic, which is AI for good. And so, aside from being a very accomplished filmmaker, there's lots here to talk about, including an event that we're coordinating with Michael in Switzerland with the, what is it called? The AI for Good UN? Is that the
Yeah,
official name?
well, first of all,
Yeah,
Arthur, great to be on your roundtable, and thank you for inviting me.
you bet.
I think this is an incredibly important message to kind of talk about. So, we're excited to have a conversation with you today. The event is called the AI for Good Global Summit, and it's the largest event the United Nations puts on with regards to AI, with a focus on technology, but also from a humanitarian standpoint. So, and at the core of it all is ITU. And I never knew who the ITU was, but they're pretty interesting when you kind of look at their past. They started somewhere around 1850, and their focus is really about when technology and communication crosses borders. So I'm pretty sure, they probably started out with the telegram and then
Right.
maybe moved on to radio.
Pony Express, the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Radio, then television, then the internet. And now, the big conversation is obviously AI and, what happens when it crosses borders and all of those things. So they're behind this summit. And, it's in the first kind of week of July. I think it's like the 6th to the 10th. And our screening is on the 9th. So.
So let's just give them a little background, the audience, on what we're screening. And then we want to go back and talk about your journey a little bit, if that's okay.
Yeah. So, I think when a lot of people, first of all, it's titled Raise, and it's based off of a 6-part docu-series that we've been putting together for the last 2 years. We traveled around the world, really with the focus. It all started out with one question, and that was, is it possible for AI to solve some of the largest problems that humanity has? Problems that were truly moonshots without the assistance of some higher intelligence, problems that we have been unable to fix by ourselves. And if indeed artificial intelligence is able to do that, how do we control it? And how do we build a world that we all look forward to? That was really I think when, filmmakers or storytellers or authors kind of start a journey or a mission, it normally begins with a single nugget. And that was kind of the kernel that, at least for myself, I started really questioning, and for no other reason, I suppose, than at that point, there were two conversations that have kind of existed throughout the world on AI. One is the dystopian conversation, where Hollywood and sci-fi writers have done a masterful job, on illuminating this over the last 70 years, and perhaps to some degree given us an element of PTSD over it all. And
Totally.
then the other side of it is the utopian aspect of it, where, you have a lot of like key people in this saying we have nothing to worry about. And we decided, myself and my partners on the film early on decided that let's go down the middle and see what's there. Let's actually, illuminate, evaluate, do research on where the rubber meets the road with AI, not next year, not a decade from now, but right now. And that was really, the beginning of it all. An interesting little side note. We had the funding for a different film, and it was actually a sequel to a film I did many years ago. And it was right as ChatGPT was kind of coming out, it was at October, November, I think. And it just became very clear that like
Yep.
AI is going to be the biggest conversation that we're going to have over the next, decade or two. And maybe we should switch lanes on this.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting that what you concluded that rather than expressing your agenda to being on one side or another, I'm not saying that was your agenda, but one's agenda, you made the smart move and gone down the middle and let's see what's happening here, right? How reasonable is that? Right? Yeah, it's really funny.
Yeah, well, it was it was a conversation that wasn't happening. And I have so many friends that don't even want to have a conversation about AI because they've just closed their mind on it. They're in fear of what's going to happen. And they have every right to have that fear. I mean, anything as big as AI is, we should be concerned about.
Yeah.
And we're not saying, well, by no means are we painting a picture within this film that we have no concerns, but we do focus on the solutions aspect of artificial intelligence. And, and some of the conversations that the film team had early on, just because we saw our families and our friends, the majority of them really kind of unsure and in fear of all of this. We did not want to make another film that, this doomsday scenario where people don't even want to watch it, where they stick their head in their sand and just kind of move on from it. We wanted to, if there was a story out there and we could, and we could find it, we wanted to share, that, hey, maybe there's some hope in all of this.
Yeah. I actually think there is, and what a great time to be alive, but that's just my siloed opinion.
I agree.
And we have already experienced, at least publicly, that AI has helped mathematicians solve problems that they never thought they'd be able to solve. I mean, just math by itself, right? Which makes sense. Like, okay, computation, compute, math, iteration, right? Experimentation totally makes sense that AI would help you with that. And of course, if we're optimistic about it, which it takes the same amount of energy to be optimistic than pessimistic, right? Then we are likely to solve a bunch of medical issues that we've been challenged with just because I mean, look at, you can get a human genome printout for your human genome printout for $200 on the internet. Like, what's that? It used to take, 4 years and a few $1,000,000. I mean,
Yep. We get into all of that. So, if we looked at the series is a 6-part series and we break it down. And, so the first episode, we dig deep into agriculture and global food supply. And, is it actually possible for AI to help us create really a new space on how to grow food? Will AI hold these chemical companies that are pumping stuff in, all of this into our food and making us unhealthy? Will AI allow, an average person to hold those companies accountable? And so we really kind of get deep into the conversation of agriculture and food. And we illuminate some really cool companies. I mean, just to give you an example of this one company, and they actually are through the series. It's a company called Planet Labs. And Planet Labs takes a picture of every 3 meter by 3 meter section of the earth every week. They know every single tree on earth. Crazy, right? And so, and when we were talking to him, he was like, when we started this company, which wasn't that long ago, a satellite that we would send up in space was the size of a school bus. Now it's literally like this big. Just to give you an example of like one of the things that we spoke about in the series that Planet Labs is doing, who is the founder, shared a story with me. He goes, to give you an example, in Brazil has had a big problem with trying to protect the rainforest. People come in, they want rare earth minerals, they want to deforest it. The rainforest is the size of the United States. How do you control, every square meter of that? So through satellite imagery, the Brazil now gets the information. And what they've learned is that when people start cutting these thin roads and avenues into, the places where they need to go in order to get the goods, it takes them a while. And they were never able to find those people until they extracted what they needed and they were gone most of the time.
too late. Yeah.
Last year alone, with this technology, the Brazil government arrested 3,000 different cases and confiscated over $5 billion in heavy equipment. And those are things that, like, when you think about AI, you never even really think about, right?
Yeah.
Planet Labs is also monitoring fishing vessels. So, if countries are going off, the coast of poor cities and robbing them of their fish, Planet Labs is tracking all of that. And Planet Labs is just one of, I think we probably have like 30, 35 companies that we kind of showcase within this series, just that are doing unbelievable things.
Yeah. We talked about this on another podcast, but it's always been a topic that people are troubled with having glyphosate in our food system, right? And that alone, we know that glyphosate continues to be used by the farmers because they don't have a credible alternative, even though we know that the effects of that are bad across the board, right? And we also know that the company who owns glyphosate has continued to use it because there's such demand, and that they've set a sinking fund to pay for the lawsuit. So it's kind of a screwed up system, right? Yeah, we know we're liable, but we we make so much money that it doesn't matter. And I'm not trying to make an evil corporate argument here, but I had the opportunity to talk to a bunch of farmers, and they're saying we're open to an alternative. It's just that for the alternative right now, for example, we know of a alternative of glyphosate. It's just too expensive. At the end of the day, they would not be able to produce a product for the consumer. That doesn't make it right that we have glyphosate in our soybeans, but or perhaps almost everything. But a thing like that, you would think AI could solve pretty quickly, right?
It can. And, we interviewed several people in this space. So one of them was Carlo Mondavi, the grandson of Robert Mondavi. And, he shared, his own understanding when, his friends that are farmers and himself, when they got to 18 or 20 years old, their parents throwed them the keys to the tractor and said, "Hey, go do better." And, so they went out and they tried to make their way on the farm and figure out the best ways to do it. And all of a sudden, you know, corporations showed up and said, "Hey, you can eliminate mowing if you put this strip down here. If you put this chemical here, it can save you this. It's actually going to save you fuel and oil on having to mow every time it rains, which is good for the climate." And they were sold this to the point where it's actually in universities as well. And so, Carlos' point was, by the time you're 25, 30, and you're really like ready to set your feet into the soil, the chemical companies, they already have you. And they're making great cases on how to save money, which is important for farmers. I mean, every nickel to a farmer is everything. So, I don't, I think what Carlo kind of highlighted was the, the error, what he called 2.0, which is the chemical error in agriculture. It's not needed anymore. With satellite imagery and stuff like that, you can tell, like, if you have a disease within your, you know, 12,000 acre farm, you're going to be able to tell that disease within the first couple of days because of the satellite before it, takes over 60 or 70 acres of your product. So it's just a different space that we're kind of moving into. And that's just another scenario where AI, has the opportunity to help. One of the key parts of this series, and this is one of the beautiful things, Arthur, when you're, traveling around and you're sitting down with people and communicating with people and having dinner with people, and then you put a camera in front of them and you have an outline of the film that is fluid enough to allow the truth to come in.
Yeah.
And I think that was very important for this film. The funding, that it was a donation and nothing attached to it. Go find the truth. Go in search of the truth of this, which was important to everybody that's involved in the film. But one of the things that kind of came out of this was we were in Amsterdam interviewing an indigenous woman, actually a healer, a holy woman from the Maui tribe, who represents a lot of the Polynesian villages and things of that nature. And we're interviewing her, and I said, "Well, tell me about, what are your thoughts on AI? And be honest, like, be straight. I want to hear the truth from." And she goes, "Well, first of all, let's talk about the other AI." And I was like, "Okay, Auntie Ivy, tell me about the other AI." And she goes, "Ancestral intelligence."
Yeah.
And when she said that, the hair on the back of my neck stood up, because we always know in this film, when my partners on this, which are the DiCaprios, Leonardo DiCaprio and his father, George DiCaprio, and my producer is Laura Cox, it was always incredibly important to us to go to the center of this. And so, to give you an example, in agriculture, in that first episode, we go back to the seed, you know, we go back to the beginning, because in the beginning, we really had everything that we needed. And there's great value in that. And we learn through this process is that wisdom supersedes intelligence. You can
No,
have intelligence without wisdom,
totally.
but you can't have wisdom without intelligence. You can tell a child, don't touch that stove. It's hot. Junior, I'm telling you, don't touch that stove. It's hot. It's 400 degrees. If you touch it, you're going to get blisters on. You're not going to be able to play baseball. You're not, please don't touch it. You can give them all of the information they need not to touch that stove. When they touch it and they feel that pain and they experience that, they now have wisdom on what the father was trying to educate the son about the hot stove, right? And so when you take that and you scale it out, we think there's great lessons to be learned in all of this, especially with what we're doing now. And so one of the key like taglines that we have within all of this is, do we need to lean on the wisdom of the past to guide the intelligence of the future?
Why wouldn't we? I mean, who would argue against that? Yeah. I mean, we see that forever in terms of just people training to change horseshoes or build HVAC systems. I mean, plumbing. I mean, you just look at all that stuff and the experience that people have because they've done it for so long, handed down to the next generation. I mean, we could talk about that in almost anything, you know, even in mythological studies, right? That was just wisdom passed it down, right?
Yeah, when we were a lot of people had, well, we don't understand why you're interviewing, Chief Looking Horse or this indigenous woman from Maui. Like, this is a film about AI, isn't it? Like, like this doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
But to us, it made sense. And we weren't actually sure when we were doing all of this whether we were going to actually be able to put this together in a way that did make sense. Because this conversation, this series, Raise, and by the way, we called it Raise because we believe if executed correctly, it could raise all of humanity. And we love the word because AI happens to be in the middle of the
Be
word.
in the middle. Yeah.
But the film is much more a film about humanity and the decisions that we make today than a film on AI. Even though Jensen Hyung from NVIDIA is featured throughout the series and starts out every episode, and Jensen and I had some really great conversations about some really, interesting things with regards to humanity and how we move all of this forward. And I should also say that NVIDIA was very, very helpful through a lot of this process in helping us find some of the companies that were doing really amazing things.
I bet some of those conversations were hard subjects, right?
They were. And my hope is that this film, first of all, that people don't run from it because they see the AI title in it, right? That they sit down and they watch it and they realize that there is hope out there. And we have something we have a tool to the likes of which we've never had before to help us solve some of these global problems. But it's not going to happen by accident. Like, we can create a great world, but it has to be intentional.
It has to be intentional for sure. Because things can get run off the rails pretty easily.
They can. And, if history has taught us anything, there are evil people in the world, and those people use the newest technologies for ill will.
Yeah. And
And
they
so,
and they will continue to do so, right?
and they will continue to do so. And that's a story that's going to happen. The key is to minimize it as much as possible.
When people talk about AI, people who understand this on some level, which are arguably credible, that you would think that they know something about it. Some of them say, okay, we need the regulators to get involved, and others say, no, we don't need the regulators. We need to be self-regulated. I mean, that is a sticky wicket, right? And the solution is not obvious. And I mean, you just had, and this is just my opinion, but had Elon not bought X, we would be in a real pickle about freedom of speech. That's just my opinion, because he didn't buy it for his agenda besides freedom of speech, arguably. He bought it because, people were being coerced into doing things that were aligning with somebody else's agenda. So I kind of think about it that way. Like, how can we make it so it's not driven by somebody's agenda to either advance their interests or do ill will for the world.
Yeah, it's a delicate dance, and we interview the Secretary General of the ITU, Doreen Martin Wagner, and we get into quite deep conversations with her about that, as well as Jensen on this issue of regulation. And I don't know if there's like a clean answer for it, but one of the things that was said in the film, which I think is important, is had we set all the regulations for AI 5 years ago, they probably wouldn't work today.
Yeah, they don't apply. It's moved too fast,
And
right?
if we set all the regulations today, they may not work 5 years from now. And that's a challenge. The speed that this is taking place is really problematic in certain areas. The jobs that it's going to take are really problematic because it's going to happen so quickly. It's going to also supply a lot of great jobs, but how do we manage all of that? And that's really what we attempt to answer within the series. I believe in every single person that I interviewed in the film, the last question that I asked them was, I believe in the next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever the time frame is, AI is going to hold a giant mirror up to humanity. And that mirror is going to reflect the good and the bad of us and hold us accountable to the likes of which we have never been held accountable before. Not even
Yeah, 'cause
close.
you can't fake it out, right?
You can't. And so the
Yeah.
decisions that we're making today are going to be reflected in this mirror. And so I think this needs to be as much mission based, if not more mission based than money based at this point.
Yeah,
One of
totally.
the other challenges is, and I'm sure most people have, heard or seen this, it's a national security risk. And the framework of that really just deregulates everything. Just opens up everything for just, we need to move forward with this. And every single person that we spoke to, they truly believe that. We're in a race with China, with this or that, and other people, but it's incredibly complicated. And even when you ask AI to try and give you the answer on something like that, it's it's problematic.
It is problematic. There are people that are saying, for example, with the loss of jobs, that we're not asking the right people about whether they're concerned about or that they're concerned about losing their job or not. For example, if you're a warehouse worker at Amazon, do you want that job or do you not want that job? Right. And then I'm thinking they may or may not want that job, but they need that job. Right. So it's not whether I like it or not. It's whether how else am I going to support my family? Right.
Well, and that's one of the conversations that we've had that I personally have a problem with the answers that I've heard. And, there's this conversation about UBI, universal basic income. Right. And it's going to be great. People will have money and they'll be able to write poetry and they'll be able to do things that they were never able to do before. I lived in LA for 25 years. The people that I know that were trust fund kids or never had to worry about a job, or it was great in their 20s. It was really good up to maybe 35. But then somewhere between 35 and 40, they realized that their life had no purpose.
Yeah.
It had no passion. And when you don't have that, you have no hope, and depression sets in and anxiety sets in. So, yeah, that's a really complicated issue. I mean, uh, that's a documentary on its own, just trying to, figure out the best methods forward with all of that.
Yeah. And it's, I've said this about politics in general, and then some of the things that are happening in the world in general as well, is that the preponderance of the population doesn't dig deep enough on issues or politics to understand what's really going on to the extent that you could figure that out. And it's not because they don't care, is they have bandwidth issues, just like everybody else, right? What am I going to do? Am I going to make sure I get a good night's sleep, get up in the morning, do my job, take Johnny to soccer, pick up Susie from ballet, and do it all over again to make sure that I'm taking care of the family unit? And when do I have time to drill deep about a issue related to the world or politics? It just doesn't happen. And so people, as a default position, will attach themselves to an ideology. I'm not saying everybody does this, and I'm not judging it, that supports what they think their position is, and that's it. And they
Yeah.
keep moving, right?
Yep.
Because there's no point in digging any deeper because it doesn't do them any good. So I think that's going to be true here is that, oh shit, I'm going to lose my job because I didn't figure out how to be a good AI prompter. So what should I do about that? Right. And what's really interesting is we know that as efficient that agents of agents are really good, you still need a human to tell it what to do and check it. It's like quality control, right? So that skill set's going to be, never mind the whole, I see it happening in my adjacent world where it's more important to get together in person with people than it ever has been, right?
Yeah. That's a big problem area. And hopefully the people that are driving this embrace this from a humanitarian standpoint because it's going to be troublesome. And there's a lot of people friends of mine in LA who they're like, I'll never make a film with AI. And I remember 25 years ago when we were moving from film to video and, the purists were like, no way I'm shooting on video. The blacks don't look the same. You can't do this. You can't do that. And of course, what happened? You know, I remember, so my father had a computer company and wrote code in the late 50s and 60s. And then he kind of got, left that business and went into something else. But I remember like in the early 90s, he was telling us that we're going to be Christmas shopping online.
Online, like, can you
Like,
believe
on the
it?
computer, and we were like, "What?" And we thought he was crazy. Well, like, we would never trust anybody to give us well, look where we are now. So, I think there's always early adopters to new technology. My filmmaking friends who have that opinion, they certainly have the right to have that opinion. And I try to share with them, "Look, I get that, but you also have an opportunity to embrace this right now and secure your position moving forward. That's not going to happen by accident. Like you need to take initiative to do that.
Intention,
Yeah,
intention.
because
Yeah,
someone's going to.
yeah.
That doesn't solve the problem with all of these others folks that may be losing their jobs because of this. But I'll share a story with you, which is interesting. We in episode 1, we go to an indoor farm run completely off of technology. And when you go to a traditional farm, I don't know, what are there, maybe 20, 30 people working on the farm, in overalls and they're, getting rained on and snowed on and they're,
Doing the hard work. Yeah,
yeah, I mean, hard work, right?
yeah.
I don't know the exact number of employees that this indoor farm had, but I would say it was well over 100. And they're in a grow zone wearing almost like hazmat suits, like the plants are in this perfect scenario because of AI where they're giving the plants everything that they need. And at first, these things were incredibly expensive. Now they're on the shelf at Kroger for the same price of organic food. And they believe in a year or two, they'll be at the price of normal food. Well, you can repeat and scale what they've built around the world. So there are new entities that are going to take place where new jobs will spring up. But, these aren't farmers that are wearing overalls. They're sitting in grow zones or on laptops writing algorithms for their next crop.
Yeah, to make sure everything's getting the nutrients they want. I mean, it's science, right?
Yeah.
Totally.
And the same with medical. When we spoke to a lot of folks in the medical space, and it's unbelievable what's going to happen. And I guess at the center of it, it's really moving from crisis management to predictive and prevention in our own health. But I think right now, the global number, and don't quote me on this, but I think the world is in need of 40,000 doctors right now.
Yeah.
And
And nurses, there's a shortage of nurses as well,
and
right?
a bigger short of nurses. And when you get to teachers, it's enormous. So this is where AI is really going to be you know, allow humanity to be able to, bring the intelligence to people where they don't have specialists or experts around them.
The other thing, and this is super political, so forgive me, but I don't really care. Imagine that even if it's a fraction of the dollar amount that's true, that we apply the AI on accountability of all the fraud that's going on in the federal government, right? We're the cleanest, dirtiest shirt in the laundry, right? We're the worst society except for all the others. So we have fraud. And what we've discovered in Minneapolis and LA and California is just a tip of the iceberg, arguably. And they're claiming that if we just get rid of that fraud, on one hand, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be twisting in the wind because they've been on the gravy train for a long time. So we're not really, care about them. But it could eliminate a fair amount of the deficit. I don't know if I believe all this, but the argument is that they would. And imagine if we applied the AI to make sure that the money that is arguably going to go solve a problem actually does. Like, how cool would that be?
The accountability that AI is going to give birth to in all sorts of fields, including, crime, should be welcomed by everybody. Because there has, I mean, yes, one of the interesting things in this film, and someone that we spoke to, and it was profound, and I hope I can paraphrase it in even an elementary level to how he actually delivered it. But, his thought was basically, how are we supposed to get AI to understand compassion and ethics and morals and honesty if we haven't been able to figure it out ourselves? Like,
Yeah.
who are we to think that, that we have the ability to do that when we couldn't do it ourselves? And if AI mimics us, we're going to blame it on AI, but is it actually mimicking who we actually are?
Yeah. It's dangerous, right?
It's
Revealing
dangerous.
the truth.
And, a lot of the people that are like a lot of the coders and the people that are like setting all these algorithms, and this is what this gentleman, went on to say, a lot of people that are really good with their minds from a technical standpoint have never really been in touch with their heart. And so a lot of these, and I'm not saying all of these coders, there's certainly some coders out there that are, wonderful, but I think there are many that are brilliant at what they do because they're technical.
Yeah.
And so how do we make sure that they understand the other side of this? And I hope this series, I hope they watch it and I hope they realize that they have the ability. Yeah, algorithms are great for this or that, but what about if we created an algorithm along with all this other stuff that included all of the knowledge that we've ever gained from nature? Imagine what that would do for curing disease. And so are we going to be smart enough to be able to open those windows within this space? And I think we are.
Yeah. I think so too. Can you share what you're saying a film, but it's a series, right?
Yeah, so we created a 6-part series that we're just taking out for, to find the right distribution for it. From that 6-part series, we have cut a 1-hour version of it. And so just a little bit of a backstory on why we would do something like that. A lot of the films that my company, Beverly Hills Productions, has done became or still are instruments for change. Many of the films that I've been involved with, they end up screening in venues like Davos, the Vatican, the Pentagon, the White House, the House, the Senate, the Parliament, where, we'll go and do a Q&A after the screening with experts to really try and start driving this message to policymakers and to people that have the ability to change the world, innovators, corporate leaders, to bring our message to them. And so when you kind of look at, yes, we make a lot of movies to entertain, but a lot of it is for education. It's kind of what we call it edutainment. It's where entertainment and edutainment kind of coexist. And we wanted that for this too. We believe this message is so vital to get out to as wide of an audience as we can that we cut this 1-hour version. The European premiere of it is going to be on July 9th at this event, the I for Good Global Summit. Fortunately, they gave us center stage.
Nice. Yeah.
There'll be a Q&A afterwards with myself and the Secretary General of the event. But then we will take this film, this 1-hour version of the film, as the other film ends up on whichever, network or streamer it ends up on. and we will have what we call event educational screenings, art with impact in key positions around the world to give people the opportunity of the knowledge that, we've gained through this whole kind of journey.
Yeah, super cool. Is it really so the first film is an aggregation of everything you did to create the seven-part series?
We cut the 6-part series, which is,
6, sorry, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
6-part series. We cut that. Each episode is between like 40, I think 45 and 52 minutes or something like that. And then from there, we took sections of it and created this 1-hour version because you can't show a 6-hour movie to
No,
people
no.
and then
Yeah.
have a Q&A afterwards. And
Yes, totally. Yeah. Just to be clear to the audience, what often happens, even though Michael's gonna be in the main stage with Secretary General, we do the screening to the wider group. We're having you know, what family office insights, gathering of people separately of that out within the conference, but outside. So we're inviting a whole group of people to that as well. So I'm super grateful to be able to do that, Michael. Thank you.
yeah, and it's I love doing this. Sundance every year they'd pick 2 films that, would premiere at Sundance. And one year it was my films, and these 2 films, they screened to the platinum card members of American Express.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
this real, so these people come in and it's this very intimate setting. And then I have lunch with all of them and part of my film team. It has lunch, and it's a wonderful experience for us to kind of get feedback on their thoughts. And I think the same type of scenario I'd love to see happen in Geneva with, with what you guys are doing, and, how we're partnering on all of this with some of this stuff.
Yeah. Super grateful. So let's talk a little bit about your filmmaking journey. You've done a lot of very cool stuff. Can you share with the group some, aside from not being comfortable about bragging about yourself, can you share some of that with us?
I'm a storyteller. You would think this would be easy, but when you start talking about yourself, it never really is. Well, if to set the backdrop correctly, I never wanted to be in the film industry. For the first 8, 10 years of my life, kind of, post college, I turned companies around. I would go into companies that had lost their way, and, they basically pushed me out of an airplane with a parachute, and I landed, on this ship, lost. And, there was a mutiny going on. And the idea was to get, a hold of the steering wheel and see if we could find calm waters. And I did that with 60 different companies. I never thought it would have anything to do with, film once I got into film, but it did, because film is, nothing ever goes right on a film set.
Yeah, it's like
You,
a curvy road, right?
it is. It's Murphy's Law. And so, I had a great kind of kickstart to, just understanding the importance of a company story and telling a story and then moving into film. So literally for like the last 25, 30 years, I've been making films. I have also consulted with some networks and things like that. I've made some really bad films, and we've been lucky enough to get a couple good ones. An interesting side note: when I kind of left Florida heading toward California, I think everybody gets in that desert that's going out there, whether they're a writer or a director or an actor, and they have dreams of like, man, it would be great if I this accolade or that accolade. And the one thing that I never thought of once, not even for a second, on that long journey through the desert as I was heading out to Hollywood, was that, maybe someday one of my projects would end up on the moon. And, a film that I did 15 years ago, well, 2.5 years ago, I got a call that, someone was putting together a time capsule, an arts and humanity time capsule to put on a SpaceX rocket that would take off from NASA, and they would land it on the moon. And it would be this story of the human race and our journey while we were on Earth.
How cool is that?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And so they picked 222 artists, everybody from Beethoven to Stan Lee to Elvis, Rembrandt. And the sole documentary film that they took was a film that I did years ago. So you never know, like really where
What was the subject of the film?
the subject of the film was. It was called Climate Refugees. And the subject of the film was the intersection of civilization where overpopulation, overconsumption, lack of resources, and a changing climate are slamming into each other. And the outcome were these people that were forced to relocate because they were running out of water and food. And it's really the first climate film that was received well, both on the left and the right. In fact, our test screening of the film was for the House and the Senate. And I knew the left would love it. I was really interested on, whether the right would love it or not. And then the film really kind of speaks about, regardless of whether our climate is changing because of natural terms or because man is causing it, these people are running out of water and food and they're crossing borders. And we're going to have to deal with it at some point in our life. In the past, if you ran out of water or you no longer had fish at your, along the bay, you could pick up your stuff and go travel to, we were nomadic. Well, we live in a border nation society now, and it's not as easy to cross borders. So that was the project that yeah, I was sitting up on the
Super cool. So
yeah.
you made the trek to Hollywood, and I mean that whole world is completely different than what you were. I mean, you probably built some chops and like you said, flying down and righting the ship. But that really interesting. You made the trek out there.
Made the truck out there after I'd really kind of carved out a good career for myself. But I just, I've always been an artist, and I just thought it was the right thing to do. And it was a journey. I mean, it was, Hollywood is not an easy nut to crack. They don't really, you don't get ahead just by hard work, ethics, and morals.
Well, that's put politely. So, there was a show that we were watching about restaurants trying to get a Michelin star, and they went into LA, and the narrator was saying the restaurant scene in Los Angeles is markedly different than everywhere else. The people who go to the Michelin star restaurants are not as interested in as most people are to get good food and a stunning experience. They're more interested in who's in the restaurant.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. If you like people watching, I mean, Los Angeles is certainly one of the places to be. I had a great time there. I loved it. I've lived there longer than any other place I've lived in my life. I live in Nashville now, so
What a great town that is. Yeah.
the energy and creativity in this town right now is exploding.
Yeah. And it's comfortable to be there. It's safe, right? It really is. They've done it. Whoever's responsible for that has done a good job.
Yeah,
And
I live right downtown, and I've never had a moment where I did not feel, you know, safe. I mean,
yeah,
it's a very
it's,
safe city.
yeah, you got a lot of bachelorettes running around drinking and having fun, but that's sort of the, shtick down there, right?
It is. That's definitely the summer shtick on
Yeah.
weekends.
Yeah.
But for me, it's like I love going to hear the music throughout the week, and there's
Food's
a
great.
create. I'm sorry.
The food is awesome.
Food's great. It's fried a lot. I mean, it
Yeah.
certainly doesn't have they don't have the healthy cuisine that California has. But no, I love it here. I'm excited that I'm here.
So I would say, is it fair to say that this six-part series is going to consume a fair amount of your time on the next year or two?
It will.
Yeah.
It has for the last 2 years as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, we think this message is so important that we are creating a mission-based force to share this with the world. For the people that don't want to hear anything about AI, we want to let them know that there is an opportunity for really greatness if we really focus on this and we figure out a way how to manage this. But I think at the core of it, love is really important. And, and as I've said before, this does not happen by accident. Like we all need to get involved in this. We need CEOs of companies. We need politicians to educate themselves. We need artists. We need innovators. We need coders. We need wisdom keepers. We need high schools and grammar schools and universities to really put on the table the reality that, wow, we have an opportunity to create the greatest world we've ever lived in.
I
The
think,
question is, will we?
yeah, Michael, I think that's the epic question. And we've talked about this before, but it is all about loving kindness when you figure it out. And I'm just talking about life, but the, like, if you could activate people to reach out and get engaged, it'll be far better than if they just sit on the sidelines because they can craft what it ends up looking at. I don't know whether there's a fair amount of controversy around ChatGTP and how they went from nonprofit to profit, those lawsuit with Elon and all that kind of stuff. But I was listening to the CFO of ChatGTP at OpenAI, and if you believe her, they want the free version to be available to everybody. And so that's one of their missions, right? And they've got Anthropic and, all of them, just go down the list with the exception of Grok. They have compute problems.
They have a
Right?
what?
Compute.
Yeah.
They have it's a big problem. And so I get what I'm saying is I think that there's some evidence already that the people who are controlling the companies that can provide access to the population has some intention to make it available, for a free version, even though it has limited tokens and all that kind of stuff. But it's better than just shutting the door, I would think.
Yeah. And, I think you're right. But we also need to be careful with that free version because look what the free versions of social media did.
Yeah, totally.
What we learned were we were the product.
We were the product. That's right.
And, it's incredibly easy for the people that control the algorithms to control the truth. And everybody's truth needs to be calculated within these algorithms. From indigenous people to the most powerful, business innovators. I mean, the whole spectrum. Everybody really should be included in this because this should be for everybody. And if we're going to build a world that not only benefits some people but all people, I think the round table should be fairly large and include everybody.
Yep. All the constituents. I agree. Well, I admire that you've taken this. And I just want to repeat again what you said, because when you follow the money, it's often revealing. And in your case, the money didn't come with any attachment. The money came to make this, that basically said, do whatever you think is best. And we don't have an agenda that we want you to express. Is that a fair way to put it?
Yeah, and it's even more than that. The money came for a different project.
Yeah, really.
When I went back to the donator and I said, "Hey, we're thinking about making a change here, but I want to make sure that you're cool with it." And he was like, "Wait, what?" Because it was completely different than what we were doing. And after I shared with him, look, we want to like focus on where the rubber meets the road. We want to tell the truth on this. Like, is there an opportunity for great things to happen through this? And how do we do that? And how do we manage, you know, the other side of this? And so he was like, yeah, great. They have nothing involved. There's no propaganda issues with this. And, with some of the people that are involved in this film as executive producers, that was incredibly important, that we didn't have anyone pushing an agenda. As I mentioned earlier, Jensen is in the film. He was interviewed. He spoke his wisdom in his words. NVIDIA was incredibly helpful with introducing our film team to people that maybe we should look at what they're doing, because the film has a crazy wide scope. And we're talking to people who are communicating with whales, like
Nice.
literally communicating with whales, all the way to people who believe that they're going to be able to solve pretty much most diseases in the world.
Yeah.
But no one from NVIDIA to the funders or the donators had anything to do with any decisions that were made within this film.
And setting the agenda, right? Yeah.
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 Which is rare. You spoke, about Clint earlier, and that's kind of how we met. Clint and I have had many conversations with regards to the importance of independent documentary filmmaking. And so most of my friends who make independent documentary films or film series, they spend 80% of their time looking for the funds to make the film, and then just getting the film distributed. They're the last real source of investigative journalism that isn't under large legacy banners, where they have these guardrails and guidelines that they have to stay within to tell the story. So when we have donations for films like or the series like we just did, it's incredibly important, because we hold people accountable. We share stories that we think people should hear about, and we believe that if we focus on the right things and we allow wisdom to guide our intelligence, we can create a world that perhaps very few of us ever thought was possible. We can clean the majority of oceans and rivers of plastic by 2040,
Yeah, I believe it.
but again, it's not going to happen by accident. We have to be intentional about this. We have to manage this. We have to set the guidelines. We have to set the guardrails for it. But as you stated earlier, I'm incredibly excited. I think it's an awesome time to be alive.
Wild. It's, every time you you think that the most miraculous thing just happened, another miraculous thing comes right behind it. Like, it is just happening so fast.
Yeah, and if I was 18 years old right now, like, the
Popping the
things
champagne, baby.
yeah, the things that you can create in your basement now, you can build $1 billion business.
It is unbelievable. There's a term that has been used in Silicon Valley now, calling the AI vampires. These people who were developers are realizing how quickly they can spin up a product or develop something. And they are so enthusiastic that they don't want to sleep because they start an agent of agents to build something that they were dreaming about that would take, $2 million in 2 years. They can do it in an hour, right? It's that dramatic. And so they don't want to sleep because they move on to the next one while that agent is working away in the background, right?
So, I am guilty of that as well.
Yeah.
I got consumed with creating certain things within this film, and, one of the cool things in this film is we give Mother Earth a voice, and we've been talking for Mother Nature for quite some time, and we've done probably a pretty bad job of it. But what if she could have a voice and she could speak for herself and she was this digital avatar? And yeah, I mean, I think creative people that like tune into the abilities of AI, it can keep you from going to bed because you can just go so deep into this creative lane.
It's inspiring.
Yeah.
Totally is inspiring. Well, we're going to wrap it up. Michael, thank you for doing this. And to the audience, we hope to see you in Geneva. And we're really, really excited about the screening, but also pulling together people who can be intentional about helping this become a better world. The whole loving kindness thing, it's not to be taken lightly. And so I appreciate it. And I really appreciate you doing this, Michael.
You bet, Arthur. Thank you very much. I hope to see all of you in Geneva and, have a conversation with you. And because it's going to take all of us, we all need to move this forward.
No doubt. Great. Thank you for everybody for joining us today. Till next time.